I am Colby Sumner, and this is America, Fog of War.
Pride of our nation, this day have set upon a mighty endeavor, the struggle to preserve our republic. Men's souls will be shaken with the violences of
The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it. And one path we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender.
Was found a diary under the heading My Pledge. He had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure.
Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us again for another Hippocket History episode. As always, I am joined today by my co-host, Brett Thomas. How you doing, buddy?
Doing all right. Glad to be here. Beautiful day.
It is, man.
Yeah.
It is. It's beautiful. And we're getting, I know we're recording this a little bit before we're going to be releasing them, but summer is on its way now, and it is feeling nice out. But today we're going to be talking about something kind of unique. Again, we're still in the pre-war era right now, so battle-wise, there's not a lot to talk about, and we don't want to dive into a full-fledged hip pocket on the Mexican-American War because, like we've mentioned before, we're probably going to end up doing that at some point in a future season. But what we did want to do, because we have made such a big deal out of the Mexican-American War being like a primer for almost anybody that you've ever heard of, notable from the Civil War, we thought we'd take a little time and tell some more stories. And I don't know, man. I being a vet, I love getting to. I know these guys are mainly remembered for their actions in the Civil War, but I love getting to glimpse them early on in their career in a situation that's not as well known and where they're still just doing awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's wildly unknown information that we have here, and it's not something researched as, maybe not as popular as the Civil War, like you said, but nonetheless important because a lot of these guys received some of their first combat experience here.
Right.
And that's important.
So that being said, we're going to do a little bit from both sides of the line here. We'll do a few guys from the gray side and do a few guys from the blue side. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. We just to let everybody know, Tommy and I, we kind of picked, one for each side that we wanted to find some stories on, and now we're going to tell each other about them. So for half of the show, I will be just as much of a listener as all of you out there, and then the other half will be likewise for Tommy.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to kick it off with our first notable person from the Civil War that we're going to cover today, and their actions in Mexico, and why they're remembered for those actions, and kind of how they apply to their tactics and the way they operate during the Civil War. And to me, there's almost no one that really shows their true colors and how they're going to act in the Civil War the way that this person does. This person is highly aggressive, a very effective commander, and honestly, barring the moral side of everything, and who he swore his allegiance to in the Civil War and the cause for which they were fighting, barring all that aside, if we're just looking at battlefield track record, I gotta say he's towards the top of my list too, because he reminds me of an early version of what the Marine Corps is today, and that's through the intensity and the violence of action. Very aggressive, very, very aggressive. Always a smaller, usually most times a smaller force versus a much larger force, and he comes out victorious. And that's none other than Thomas Stonewall Jackson. Now, this is going to be long before he earns that nickname. But he will make his self known a few different times in the Mexican-American War. The first being at the Battle of Contreras, and that's going to be about 10 miles south of Mexico City. He's going to find himself in a 3-hour duel against superior Mexican artillery.
That's a long firefight,
Dude, especially with artillery. That's intense. I mean, think about what the sounds were like. You know, because you know what artillery round sounds like coming overhead. It truly does sound like a train. I can't imagine what a cannonball sounds like flying overhead, though. That's got to be crazy sounding.
I'm sure it's much slower and just much more
so which means
wilder.
it's deeper and louder and all kinds of freaky. You know?
Yeah.
Anyways, he finds himself in this firefight against Mexican artillery. Now, although he's under heavy fire, Jackson's going to refuse to back down. So already he's kind of showing that Stonewall trait that he is going to be later recognized for. He's going to have the other section commander in his battery is going to be killed during the heavy exchange. But Jackson, just as aggressive as he is remembered today, is going to advance further into the enemy fire and continue to employ his guns. A fellow soldier is going to recall that Jackson had been ordered there, and his conception of duty as lieutenant required him to stay. His men were falling all around him, and he too, with the last, would have fallen. Jackson fought well at Veracruz and Contreras, but those battles are not what Mexican-American war veterans would remember him for the most. It's his actions in the battle for Mexico City that earn him the honors and respect of his fellow soldiers. A large castle that sits atop a 200-foot hill southeast of the city is known as Chapultepec, and that's the last obstacle to taking the country's capital, right? So this is like this is like the death stroke in the war. You know, this is the last major action. And I could imagine that, you know, the U.S. Army guys there at the time felt like they had some momentum on their side. But you have to think, too, the fighting is probably going to pick up its intensity tenfold because the people defending Mexico City realize this is their last hoorah, you know what I mean? This is their last stronghold.
Backs against the ropes.
Right.
Ready.
And I'll tell you, the one thing you do know is that when someone doesn't have an avenue of egress or a way to retreat, they will fight so much harder. Jackson's artillery unit finds itself on a narrow causeway, and for those of you that don't know what a causeway is, that's, you know, you're going to hear that often when we talk about warfare, especially when we get into like World War II and some of the more modern wars. But a causeway is just going to be an avenue of approach to the objective. And usually when they're using a reference like causeway, it's something big that an entire army can, you know, utilize, or a division, or some large formation of troops. That being said, they're going to find themselves on a causeway beneath the castle's battlements. So very close to the castle, but they're going to find themselves on an exposed road leading up to this, you know, this last stronghold at Chapultepec, and they're going to be under heavy enemy fire. Jackson's going to actually describe the situation later as being fully exposed in a road which was swept with grape and canister, and at the same time, thousands of muskets from the castle itself poured down like hail. For those of you that don't know what grape and canister is, grape shot's going to be, you know, a shotgun shell has a bunch of little pellets in it. It's very effective and very destructive. Well, a grape shot is the same thing, just bigger. Instead of a little pellet, think of something about the size of a ping pong ball, maybe a little bit bigger, and it's just solid metal. And there's a ton of them in one round, so a huge shotgun. I can tell you I've been shot at by a lot of things, but that would be terrifying. I don't think I would want anything to do with that.
That's a bit terrifying. It seems like just something like that flying through the air all around you could be not a fun causeway to be in.
No, not at all. Not at all. So Jackson's going to face off against 8 Mexican cannons with only 2 of his own, and they're going to do it at very short range. Again, they have to be to employ things like grape shot. He immediately lost all 12 of his horses, so the horses that are in charge of moving his cannons and his caissons and all that stuff, all 12 of them dead right off the bat. Isn't that crazy?
That's not something you think about every time. Like the horses,
that would be,
how important it is.
That'd be terrible to see, too, because they're your war buddies, man.
Yeah, they're your war buddies, and I think horses have, of course, a calming effect to them if you're not, you know, on your way to the battle.
I kind of equate it to like the bomb dogs, man. I hated seeing them get PTSD at the end of the deployment. You know, like just to let everybody know, when we started, you know, when you start your deployment, you go over with bomb dogs that will sniff out IEDs. And in the beginning, like, you know, when you're getting in a lot of gunfights, they're good, they're there, they're ready to work. But you can tell, just like in a human or anybody else, you know, you get a few months into it, and the repeated exposure to all that starts to have effects even on the dogs, and it's really sad to see, man. It's I couldn't imagine seeing 12 horses just killed right in front of me that quick.
That's a lot.
Needless to say, even though all 12 horses are killed, he and his small squad are going to unlimber the guns, roll them forward, and return fire. Now, one of his 2 guns will be hit by enemy artillery, which will result with Jackson's artillerymen fleeing to the safety of a nearby ditch, but Jackson refuses to retreat. I couldn't imagine that. Back then, we don't have the same moral and philosophical doctrines built up from decades and decades and decades of experience that we do now. But still, I would have a hard time even imagining seeing that from some U.S. troops. Not to say that it's outside of the realm of possibilities either.
Right. Well, it is natural to take cover when things are getting close to you like that. I can understand that situation, but things happen in the blink of an eye. So all of a sudden, maybe he realizes, hey, I am the only one out here.
Yeah, because that's exactly what happens. They all leave him. So he's going to be pacing back and forth alone with shells flying all around him. One cannonball is even going to go between his legs, which is
unreal.
That's so crazy to think about. I mean, I think about the size of a cannonball. Dude, I would just be thinking, what were the odds that my legs were spread wide enough in the middle of a step that a cannonball just went through and didn't touch me? That's bonkers.
That is bonkers.
That's crazy. He's going to have, like I said, he's going to have a cannonball fly between his legs. But he's going to be trying to motivate his men, and he's going to be yelling to them, there's no danger. See, I am not hit. Now, later he's going to say, now Jackson's known for being very pious and very like a religious guy and socially awkward, but wouldn't tell lies, always, kind of very straight edge kind of a guy. He will say later that this was the first and only lie he ever told.
I mean, it's kind of a wild moment.
It is. I mean, you got to say what you got to say to get your guys to go to work, but I just... That struck me as a funny little anecdote there. I don't know why it stood out to me so much, but I found that pretty giggle worthy. So finally, after trying to motivate his guys for a good bit here, an older sergeant is going to come out and join them, and together they're going to drag the remaining cannon across the ditch and up onto the road, and they're going to return fire on the Mexican artillery. Another member of the gun crew will eventually come forward as well. But Jackson, instead of saying, come on and help us, he's going to tell him, go back yonder, tell Colonel Truesdale to send men forward, tell him with 50 men, we can overrun the battery ahead. And that right there, if you were to just take that little excerpt, from him, that could be applied to almost any battle situation you're going to find Jackson in where he has a commanding officer. He's so aggressive. He's always wanting to push the fight, push the fight, push the fight. And you can see it time and time again. And that's what I kind of when I compared him to like what the Marine Corps is now. The Marine Corps is very aggressive. They teach that from a very early stage on, and I would imagine that even Army infantry is the same way. I can't speak to it 100%. I wasn't in the Army infantry, but I do know in the Marine Corps it's uber aggressive, and Jackson is exactly that as well. That being said, Jackson and his sergeant now stood with a single gun on the road in the middle of a crazy storm of cannon, solid shot, canister, and musket fire far in advance of the American army, just dueling it out by themselves. Jackson's division commander is going to order Jackson to retire, and basically that means to fall back. But Jackson's going to refuse. He's not going to obey the orders. He's going to send word back that it would be more hazardous at this point to retreat than to stay put, which I can kind of empathize with there, or sympathize with, I guess, because I've been in a few situations where the fighting is really intense, but it would be less logical to try to retreat, because in the retreat, I mean, this is a pretty well-known thing. It's in the retreat that most armies get crushed,
Right.
And you don't want to be one of those. You don't want to be in that situation.
Just
you might as well just fight back a little harder.
Hold your ground, hold your base of fire, and just keep going.
Right. At this time, another officer is going to arrive and to the scene there with Jackson and try to give whatever aid he can. And immediately when he pulls up, he's going to get his horse shot out from underneath him. After he's able to get up and kind of dust himself off, with help from a few of the other gun crew members, this officer got the second gun back in action. So now there's two guns again going full tilt. It's soon after this that the defenses of Chapultepec Castle begin to crumble, and the long American lines begin to surge forward and upward. But Jackson's work isn't finished. He's going to do one more thing here that I just had to throw in here because it makes him seem, again, so uberly aggressive. It's Do you love America Fog of War and want more of it? If so, Brett and I would love it if you became a member of the America Fog of War Patreon. Visit americafogofwar.com and follow the link Become a Member located in the menu at the top of the homepage and pick from one of our 3 membership subscription options. As a member, you can enjoy ad-free early access to all of our free episodes, like this one, as well as gain access to not 1, but 2 extra episodes a month, and join either Brett or myself on a monthly Zoom call where you can help us make decisions pertaining to future episodes of America Fog of War, discuss war movies and books, and talk about some of your favorite American battles and campaigns, hip pocket class style. Your membership subscriptions are what enable us to bring you the content you love every month. Help us grow this podcast and become part of the team today at americafogofwar.com.
Do you own a business or operate with an organization that needs to purchase supplies regularly? If so, Colby and I recommend trying Amazon Business. We use Amazon Business and couldn't be happier with our experience. With our membership, we are able to keep our costs down and choose from millions of products related to our industry. Whether you shop with Amazon or not, you will discover Amazon Business to be a user-friendly process. Business Prime is a separate membership from Amazon Prime, but with the same free shipping and more benefits when making purchases. Make workplace procurement easier with convenient delivery options, simplified purchasing workflows, multiple payment options, and a competitive marketplace with business-only pricing and quantity discounts. With Amazon Business, organizations of any size can simplify buying, so check it out. Creating an account is simple, easy, and of course, it's free. Visit americafogofwar.com and follow the link Try Amazon Business, located in the menu at the top of the homepage to gain access to all these great benefits and more.